Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today I wanted to go over a general market update that we will be focusing primarily on Bitcoin and kind of what it's doing, just because generally, Bitcoin's moving the market right now. But obviously, that will start to change once we move out of Bitcoin season and once Bitcoin seems to have topped. However, I do think we are still quite a ways away from that. And so right now, I do think it makes the most sense to be pointing towards Bitcoin as far as looking at where things are going to go next and stuff like that. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive right in. So starting out, we can see it's actually like a primarily green day within the market. Obviously, we have a couple, small reds here and there, but overall, definitely a lot more green than red and more like higher percentage green gains than we're seeing red losses. So overall, things are looking pretty good here. Again, mixed still overall, but I would say there's a lot more optimism and just like a general uptrend within the market, which is why we're seeing more green more consistently, just because I think people are starting to feel a little bit better about the state of the market. I do think the interest rate cuts really did help that quite a lot. But ultimately I think things are starting to look a little bit better. As I've said though, when people start to get a little bit too excited, that's when we should maybe start to be, reconsidering where things are going to go, at least in the short term. So moving on to fear and greed, we can also see this as well as, this is the first time in a while that we've been over 50, it feels like. Probably the first time we saw that, or I guess the last time we saw that was, what is this, 25th of August? So, that was probably the last time. So it's been just shy of a month since we saw creeping back into neutral. As we can see, we saw a couple day stretch here, and now we're sitting at about a couple day stretch here as well. So obviously, things could correct pretty quickly to kind of pull us back into the fear territory. Given the rate cuts, I'm not exactly sure if that's what we're going to see. But I do think there probably is one more kind of major correction to shake kind of the last people out before we start to move into an uptrend. This is something that I don't have like super high conviction on, so I'm definitely like still dollar cost averaging and trying to hedge my bets from that perspective, just because while I think it's possible and maybe I would even say probable that it happens, I don't think it's like a guarantee. And so looking at the chart, we can start to see kind of why. So obviously, we hit our most recent low on the 6th of September, and then essentially it's been, obviously very, very positive ever since then. We hit the low of about, 52,500. We're currently sitting at about, 63,000, and then we had a top out of around 64,000. So a pretty decent move to the upside, obviously. What we can see here, though, is we are getting toward the top of this descending channel. It does look at this point in time like price is starting to kind of lose momentum here. So it could be that, maybe we ran into this resistance and maybe we start to come back down, or, maybe we consolidate in this area for a little while. I would say, the longer that we spend consolidating, particularly between these two, but anywhere over the kind of the halfway margin of the descending channel is obviously, good news. Of course, until we break out of this descending channel, nothing is really guaranteed. But ultimately, we are starting to see at least a tiny bit of consolidation, short term at least, in this area. Like I said, I do still think we've got probably a couple big moves ahead of us. Going back down, touching the bottom of this channel, and also dipping into this liquidity zone just continues to seem to be like the most likely option. Like I said, and this isn't financial advice. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen, but it just, especially as the descending channel starts to dip into this liquidity zone, I just can't help but feel that we probably see a return to this level. Again, I'm not counting on it, but I am definitely like prepared for that outcome. But I'm also prepared for the outcome that it doesn't happen as well, just because in this market you truly do never know. And so you got to try and obviously kind of pick a case that you're most confident in, but also that doesn't mean you should like completely neglect all other possible outcomes. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. As we can see, we have seen kind of some pretty big wicks both to the up and downside. So this to me kind of indicates a decent amount of indecision in the market in terms of like where we're going to go next. Ultimately, are we going to get rejected by this resistance? Are we going to break through it and maybe try and bounce off the top of this descending channel? It's hard to say, and ultimately I don't think the market knows either. And so, I do think whichever way it does move is probably going to catch the majority of people by surprise, just because there's just a general amount of indecision, i.e. nobody actually has any idea where things are going to go for sure. And so looking at the liquidation levels, we can kind of see this, right? We can see on the liquidation map, we've got, at the all the way maximum 1.2 billion, and over here we've got 1.21 billion. So, obviously the total like amounts of leverage to be liquidated both to the up and downside is almost identical. And what we can see is they move up kind of in the same magnitude as well, right? Like we've got a massive wall of liquidations basically like just sitting under 64,000, and then another big wall is sitting at about 64.5. Same thing here to the downside. We've got a big wall at about 62, and then another big wall sitting at basically like 61,200. So obviously, if we go back to the chart, what we can see here is, there's a lot of people kind of placing their stops kind of in this area. It looks like, the first chunk is putting it right kind of below this wick. Let's actually zoom in a little bit so we can see what's going on. We got a big chunk kind of placing their stop losses below this wick, and then another big chunk placing their stop losses below this wick, and then we've got to the upside, just to remind myself, we got 64 and like 64.5. So yeah, basically we've got essentially, the first group kind of placing theirs right above this wick is what it looks like, and then the next group putting it closer to above these like local tops over here. So obviously between about this area and this area on the chart for perspective, we can see, there's a bunch of liquidity sitting in this general area. And so it would not surprise me too much if we saw some sort of like boom, boom, or maybe some sort of, boom, boom, something to essentially liquidate both of those as quickly as possible. And given that, so much of this is so close to the price, seeing what would this be, about $1,500 move to the upside, and then like an immediate, $5,000 move to the downside, like that would be a pretty volatile day. But like we've seen that before, we've seen more than that before. So something like that, I don't think is necessarily out of the question. And then, if we look at the 7-day, we can see, we're definitely still, we're still favoring moving to the downside to liquidate longs. Same with the 30-day. Same type of thing here, although this is starting to level out a little bit more than what we've seen in the past days. But that's obviously still very clear that it's favoring liquidating longs. So, what this means to me right now is obviously, there's a lot of indecision up at this level. And then once we break this level one way or the other, I'm considering or thinking that a possibility could be that we, jump up to this level and then start our run back down, just because that's kind of what would be the point of maximum pain within the market. But, we don't know for sure. So looking at the Bitcoin Rainbow price chart, we can see that the current price is sitting right within essentially like the buy territory. We aren't in fire sale. If we were to come down to some of these lows, it is possible that we would be sitting within the fire sale. Actually, I think we'd be just above the fire sale territory. But depending on when we come back in, we could be sitting within the fire sale territory. And then obviously, we would expect to see a run up to, kind of is this a bubble, potentially FOMO intensifies, but like probably in the is this a bubble territory. Maybe, I think a lot of prices are calling for kind of the 150 range. And if that's true, then we'd be in the still cheap territory. So obviously, the Bitcoin Rainbow price chart indicator is calling for probably like $200,000 Bitcoin, maybe over 170 at least. So, obviously much more bullish predictions coming out of the Rainbow price chart. I do kind of wonder how long this type of stuff will hold up, because as we've seen just over time, the peaks have consistently gotten lower. Last time the peak sat within, is this a bubble territory, it looks like? Yeah, it basically sat within the... Actually, no, it went into the FOMO intensifies territory. Sorry. So, it was sitting within the FOMO intensifies, which means for us to get back there, we would need to be above 330,000, which I thought, it's possible, definitely very possible, but that seems like a lot. Barring hyperinflation or some wider collapse of the US dollar, I feel like this is going to be very, very unrealistic and unlikely, but still possible, definitely. So, definitely keep this in mind as we're kind of looking through. Again, I don't, I don't know how long this chart's going to hold, so I definitely don't like use this as my guiding light. But, as you've probably seen on the channel, like I try to use each piece to kind of gain some different perspective. And when all of them kind of point a similar direction, then, I like to kind of use that as more of a guide rather than just one piece of data and just like hang on to it relentlessly. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. The last thing that I want to go over is some news that we actually got yesterday, which is that the SEC approves BlackRock's spot Bitcoin ETF options listing, right? So essentially now we'll be able to start trading Bitcoin options through the normal stock exchange, which is definitely really good. I think this will this will bring a little bit more of like potentially retail, definitely like pro trader involvement, just because Bitcoin is very volatile compared to the rest of the market, and obviously options do. You can make a very decent chunk of money doing options if you can play the volatility right. This is something that I don't necessarily quite understand how to do, but I do know some people that are pretty good playing options and they do quite well for themselves. And so, I think this could be something that, similar to the Tesla stocks in 2021 or some of the IPOs, in that same type of time frame where, they were really, really thriving on the volatility and the massive, like the propensities to make massive moves. I think this could potentially, this Bitcoin option listing could potentially do the same thing to get retail investors more involved, which obviously, would be bullish for bringing attention back into the crypto space. So anyway, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, please do give me a like and subscribe. It really does help me out. Also, I didn't mention this earlier, but I am using Margex almost exclusively to trade. So if you are interested in leverage trading, you can trade up to 100x leverage, as well as they have a $10,000 deposit bonus, and they are doing a Caspa airdrop through the end of September. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, I do have a link below. Feel free to go check that out below and get signed up if that's something that you're interested in. Leverage trading is inherently more risky than normal trading. So if you do want to do that, just make sure that you understand kind of more the nuances of how leverage trading works, and you are being careful because it is risky. So I think it makes sense to maybe kind of dip your toes in before you go dive in head first. But again, not financial advice. You need to make your own decisions. So also, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, please do drop them in the comment section below. I really do like hearing all your guys' feedback. And so, if you have anything that you wanted to bring up or just want to interact with me, that is the best way to do so. I do read and respond to all of my comments. So, please let me know if you have any questions or anything that you want me to see, just because I do really appreciate your guys' feedback. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in the next video.